Odyssey, Chapter 20. Kamahl rode Emerald east, watching for signs of the ambassador's caravan. The gecko's sinuous gait lulled the barbarian as he remembered his escape from the town. The mountain mage had climbed the rubble ramp to the keep's upper stories looking for signs of another exit as cries from the Order reinforcements sounded below. Through the dust laid down by his destruction, he could see the tracks that led him to the postern gate. The mountain warrior skittered the crystal effect, seeing its rate of advance slowing as it continued to fill the castle. The taste of the orb's magic faded as the growth slowed. The postern gate led down a hidden path outside the city walls. The tumult inside the town died down as Kamahl rejoined the flow of refugees. A golden coin secured him a spare great cloak from an Ellen bird warrior. The garment was sized for someone 9 feet tall, and even after a few alterations with a dagger it was still all-enveloping. It was a measure of the people's unrest that he did not attract more notice. He moved into the old city listening for news, but rumor ruled the crowded streets, not the Order. He headed for the Citadel road once more, hoping to find out what had occurred. Kamahl remembered the swell of power he felt as the orb changed only minutes after he saw Turk following after the lieutenant. The Mer must hold the prize by now. The barbarian wondered if Kitar survived. Somehow he doubted it. His leg began to pulse with a fresh pain from the wounds inflicted by the frog. He moved down an alley, ready for any attacker, but he was at a dead end. Despite the city's overcrowding, a momentary break in the traffic gave him privacy and allowed him to seek shelter. He drew an axe and a knife and jumped, his leg screaming in protest as he rose. As he started to fall back, he sank his tools into the wood facing on the building's corner. Rot and lack of care allowed his blades to bite deeply, sending sawdust to the alley below. He crawled up the structure's side, his arms burning as he finally reached the roof. This building was shorter than the others backing the alley. He crawled behind a storage shed and concealed himself from observation. Momentarily safe, he ate what food he had. Thirst led him to raid a rainwater cistern, and he gulped the cool water down. Weary, but even his endurance had its limits, he lay down to rest. He awoke that night. The city was quieter. The sun set some hours before. He wrapped the cloak tighter around him and drank more of the water. He had no more food. Kamahl squatted to test his leg. Finding himself fit, he decided to brave the city once more. He dropped into the alley, his lower limbs hurting at the strain, but healed enough for full use. There was still traffic on the street despite the hour, but not like Kamahl City, whose denizens never seemed to sleep. There was a different feel to those pedestrians. They were more afraid and more furtive, even as they stayed close to the lights. Kamahl remembered his friend Chaina, who seemed to know most about his city's secrets. The barbarian decided the best source of information might be one of the night birds flitting through the streets. The first lone walkers proved almost useless. His cloaked form emerged from the darkness, provoking 2 responses. They collapsed in panic or attacked with suicidal bravado. One man continued to fight even after Kamahl slapped his weapons aside several times with his bare hands. Finally, he knocked the man out in disgust. Perhaps a more predatory type would be more amenable to conversation. A group of youths moved in concert through a street. The avenue was barely lit by damp wood burning in a metal basket. A copper hood reflected light to the ground. The boys split up, settling into positions outside the flow of traffic, their actions reminding Kamahl of feral cats choosing their prey. The gang looked into the street and not towards each other. The barbarian picked a member off silently, covering the young man's mouth. They disappeared into the night, Kamahl's cloak wrapped around his catch. The boy was ragged and smelled. A rusty blade thrust through his belt. The dirty pallor of his skin and the color of his clothes hid him from those without Kamahl's night sight. Barbarian watched him struggle to exude confidence as he stood an arm's length away. "My friends will come looking for me," the city dweller said, staring hard at Kamahl. The gang member's hand was on his blade, but the weapon was left undrawn. Better for them if they don't, the barbarian said and stepped a little closer, forcing his captive against a wall. All I desire from you is a little information. Do you know what happened at the castle today? The impromptu informant relaxed slightly. They say that a Western barbarian and a group of conspirators broke into the Citadel. They were the ones behind the animal attacks. The swine forced refugees into the city so that they could strike from the cover of the crowd. Kamahl wondered how good his information could be with these falsehoods cast as truth. The traitors managed to kill the captain and the lieutenant despite all efforts to stop them. The entire order might have been crippled if not for the Mur ambassador's warnings. Tell me about Laquatus and his jack Turg, Kamahl ordered, wondering if he should waylay an order patrol. Perhaps they might have more accurate information. The merman and the pit frog were heroes, the young thug said excitedly. They would have been feted for days if not called back to the ocean on urgent business. The city dweller paused. How could you know nothing of what happened? The town has been abuzz for hours. He started forward, and Kamahl shoved him back. Why should I believe you know anything at all about the ambassador? The mountain warrior asked, showing his teeth. All you seem to know is rumor and innuendo. Because I watched them leave the city for the east, came the hot reply, the injustice of being called a liar seeming to raise the boy's courage. Kamahl's snort of disbelief further inflamed the informant. I saw them leave this afternoon, he insisted, drawing his knife. I watched the ambassador ride out of the eastern gate. He waited for an attack, but there was only silence as the barbarian melted away. Kamahl drifted through the streets, heading for the city walls. The thug's affronted pride convinced the barbarian that the boy had seen the ambassador withdrawing to the east. Moreover, if the orb fell to Laquatus, he would have set out for sea. Kamahl knew it might be a false trail, but whom could he question? The merman was as likely to lie to the powerful as mislead the masses. He would trust the word of a direct witness for now. The walls were low with ramps and ladders leading to the upper walkway. Like most defenses, the guards were more interested in keeping invaders out than townspeople in. He appropriated a coil of rope from a storeroom and wrapped it around a stone. In less than a minute, he rappelled down with a practiced twist and he pulled the strand down, leaving no sign that he had left the city. He doubted his informant would share his description. The boy seemed one who avoided the guards whenever possible. Kamahl set off to see if Emerald still waited out in the plains. Kamahl crept through the long grass, threading between the sentries. Avoiding contact felt strange. However, the barbarian imagined it as a challenge to see how close he could approach the Order camp without being detected. It took nearly a day to find Emerald, and knowing the Order believed him a bloody murderer, he kept his distance from the road and the other travellers. Only the gecko's incredible endurance and speed allowed Kamahl to finally catch up with the ambassador's party despite the rough country and avoiding enemy patrols. The Order guards and the Mur hirelings flew the Empire's standard. Kamahl's sharp eyes had caught sight of it as he paralleled them on the highway. He infiltrated the camp to see if Laquatus and Turg truly rode with the group. He had no time to waste on meaningless fights. If the orb was in the camp, then he would declare himself and win the prize in honourable combat. Circumstances demanded he fight tonight if he would fight at all. Some distance ahead of the party, an Empire caravan camped at the crossroads against a set of bluffs. As night fell, he took Emerald on a run, covering the miles in minutes. A large procession of the wagons had left deep ruts along the merging road. Dozens of captive animals sent up cries of distress as they moved in their cages and strained at their hobbles. These guards were more aware. Dogs as well as warriors patrolled the camp perimeter, preventing the barbarian from sneaking in. There were signs of nervousness, the mercenaries reacting to every rustle as an imminent attack. Kamahl heard the men talking. When would the next attack come? How bad would it be with such a long pause between them? The barbarian realized with surprise that there were no fresh signs of rampaging forest animals or destruction along the road. True, they were much farther from the great trees and the animals that sheltered there. However, he understood the problem to be continent-wide. Why had an uneasy peace fallen over the two travelling parties and, for all Kamahl knew, the rest of the plains? Such questions would have to wait until he first completed his quest. The ambassador, if he were travelling with the party, would find reinforcements on the morrow. The barbarian decided to confront the pair tonight. The tent below the standard was dark, with no guards standing before it. Kamahl moved in, wrapped in his cloak. He avoided the light of the campfires. He made sure that he could reach the weapons on his belt. His sword was secured to emerald, its length difficult to conceal on the approach. He could detect no life within the tent, but he must be sure. He had watched the caravan settling for the night without any sign of the ambassador or his jack. If they were anywhere in the camp, they must be here. He opened the flap, the rustling canvas seeming very loud. No one was inside. He saw only a mound of luggage piled on the floor. There was no sign that it had even been opened. Each piece was secured with wax imprinted with the ambassador's sigil, binding the bag's drawcords. However the merman travelled, Kamahl saw it was not with this detachment. However, the seals on the bag suggested he would eventually meet his luggage. The barbarian reached to his belt and pulled out the rope he used in his escape from the city. He was no thief, however stealthy he may be. The barbarian placed it on the baggage, returning it to the order. The camp guards never saw him withdraw through their pickets on the way back to Emerald. "They were not there," he said in response to the gecko's quizzical look. "We'll have to meet them at the coast." The lizard seemed sluggish as Kamahl secured his gear. The mountain warrior seethed at missing Laquatus and especially Turg. Though the night was chilly, he removed the Ellen robe, letting the cold flow over his skin. "However they travelled, I've lost them," the barbarian muttered as he hauled himself up into the saddle. Knowing that the cool air might slow his mount, he sent a small surge of power to the gecko. The lizard blinked in surprise at the warm air, but did seem sprightlier as he absorbed the magic. Kamahl directed Emerald down the road to the bluffs, planning to use the lizard's ability to handle any terrain. The steed would take them past the pickets over the bare rock faces, riding above the caravan guard's eyes. The lizard slowed as they neared the large camp, Kamahl vainly trying to direct the gecko's path. The lizard looked through the night at the stacks of cages and hobbled animals. Its body seemed to vibrate in sympathy with the miserable calls sounding from there. The barbarian realized he could not force Emerald to go anywhere. The gecko stared at the captured animals intensely. There were no large predators in the gathering, but rather numerous cages of small animals. The barbarian undid his sword from the gecko's side, shifting it up to his back. He looked once more back to the Order camp in the distance with the empty ambassador's tent. "We can't spend too much time on this rescue," Kamahl said, pulling small axes from his baggage and slipping them into holsters hung from the saddle. The lizard's long tongue flicked back as if in agreement. Then the beast set off for the camp. The caravan was set up by the road, sentry fires out and burning in an attempt to cover the perimeter. Guards stood their post nervously, talking to each other to reassure themselves. Kamahl wondered how the night-blind chattering fools planned to see anyone. The only danger seemed to be a pair of dogs that the guard escorted round the perimeter. The barbarian wondered what he would do if discovered, but found himself unable to feel concern. The camp looked about as deadly as a carnival, and easier to move in and out of. The gecko followed Kamahl, the mount nearly silent, with only its tail sometimes touching the ground. The outer pickets saw nothing as the pair worked through the line, using the terrain. The lizard lowered itself nearly to the ground to decrease its height. The dogs made no alarm, and the barbarian wondered if Emerald somehow stifled their senses. The cages grew closer, the smell assaulting the barbarian as the guards had not. Moving into the circle of cages was challenging. But without the threat of the dog, it was only a matter of timing. He crouched by the cages after a slow roll from the darkness. Emerald followed, and the barbarian could scarcely believe this mount had crept into the camp as well. Hunters walked slowly among the captive animals in their cages and pens, lost in their own thoughts. Suddenly the joke fell flat to the mounted warrior. Loosing the animals silently would take far too long, and he was not inclined to waste the time. Kamahl was tired of stealth. He drew his sword from his sheath on Emerald's saddle. He mounted and a guard turned to behold him, a mounted intruder in the heart of the camp. The flat of his blade sent the mercenary crashing down unconscious. The first real warning the caravan had was the long whip of flame arcing down to blaze through locks and bars. The animals were maddened by the fire's closeness. The beasts battered at their prisons as they had done so often, but now the bars fell to the ground. Mercenaries closed from all points with shouts of alarm, but Kamahl's sword streamed flame over the other enclosures, melting away iron. He ignored the guards as beneath contempt as he shouted and roused the imprisoned beast to escape. One caravan hunter came at the lizard's side only to be met by a long tongue. The muscle wrapped around his head and yanked him into crushing jaws. Kamahl's steed spat out the corpse as his rider freed more of the captured. A chain holding a group of satyrs parted as he swayed to the side, his sword severing several links. The humanoids rose on their goat-like legs and fell upon the guards coming to recapture them. Heads down they charged, their horns impacting the guards' armor. The forest fighters caused no serious injury but knocked their oppressors down. Heavy nailed hands dug into throats and joints as the prisoners fell as groups on single guards. Freeing the captured is useless, Kamahl thought as he turned Emerald to attack, if they are caught again by these mercenaries. Now he used the sword's edge, but with no passion. There was little honor in such easy slaughter, and he looked for another means of diversion. Wagons were parked opposite the animals, their contents hidden under secured tarps. There were signs of live prizes. The guards protecting them still waited as the barbarian tore through the cage area. Such valuable cargo must be more important to the caravan than small woodland creatures, Kamahl thought, and sent Emerald through the camp's heart. A creature rose up into the night, its nebulous form becoming a winged dragon. The gecko showed no hesitation, striding straight for the horned beast as it prepared to take to the air. The barbarian threw a charged axe that spun through the enemy. Emerald followed the projectile into the illusion. There was a mage of some power coming against him. The barbarian looked around in interest as his missile discharged into the ground in an explosion of flame. The gecko paused in flight, its tongue flickering uncertainly as its eyes followed nothing. The mountain mage felt a hum of hostile magic and sent showers of sparks and embers over the tents to flush out the enemy. Fabric ignited, and the restraining spell on the lizard faltered as the other mage was surrounded by fire. The barbarian swung his sword, the steel birthing a circlet of flame that cut through the air in the enemy spellcaster's neck, decapitating Kamahl's only worthy opposition in the camp. The gecko started towards the wagons parked away from the cages. The guards massed to stop the barbarian. The mountain mage simply bypassed them, hurling two axes high over the crowd to detonate amongst the freight wagons. A twisting pyre of energy and flame lit the sky, secondary explosions spreading destruction through the cargo. The guards were blown down, those not blown up. The caravan had been transporting excavated treasures from the sea. There were numerous rumors of the Mer Empire acquiring relics and fetishes from past battlefields. Items of true power must have been concealed among the wagons. Fires grew, and most of those still alive in the camp closed to extinguish the conflagration. Kamahl withdrew, ignoring the calls of his enemies. The satyrs were gone, along with most of the animals. A few hunters looked through the wreckage, but the barbarian wasted no time on them. One stooped to peer into a cage, and a stream of weasels flowed over the man, biting everywhere. The mercenary tried to run as the animals swarmed up his legs and onto his head. His flight ended as the disorientated man plowed into another cage, falling down to die under the small teeth. Calls sounded from the perimeter. Golden globes soared into the sky, illuminating what the fires did not. Guards from the false camp down the road had come to investigate the disturbance. These were worthy opponents, but too serious for tonight's light diversion. The barbarian left the camp to the newcomers, Emerald running out of the light and into the darkness. Kamahl's mount surged up the rocky bluff as the more intelligent investigators from the other camp fanned out to catch the raider. The barbarian leaned forward as the gecko went vertical, pulling away from any possible pursuit. The mountain mage signaled the lizard to halt at the cliff top. He crouched down and peered over the hunter's wrecked bivouac. The fires began to die down, the Knights of the Order using their magic against the flames. Magic flowed as a golden sheet over the burning wagons and tents, smothering the flames. The light died down as the blazes were extinguished. The barbarians saw no signs of the animals and hoped all of them were gone. "I hope that satisfies you," he said to Emerald, who seemed to nod in agreement. His mount's bloody jowls smiled, though Kamahl was unsure if the fighting or the rescue pleased the gecko most. Below, the flames were dead except for the campfires, but more bad luck struck the hunters' camp. Irritated at being forced to come investigate because of the mercenaries' obvious incompetence, the knights looked through the camp. The angry would-be rescuers tore into the last sealed wagons and suddenly treated the hapless hunters as criminals. The soldiers cut through leather and canvas to display the mounds of forbidden mechanisms. The mercenaries moved to reclaim what remained of their treasure. They were pushed away to sprawl on the ground. A few started angrily forward but stopped as golden maces lifted in warning. The knights struck at wagons carrying recovered booty. Wheels exploded in showers of splinters as the Order guaranteed through blows that the fetishes would not leave the camp. A mercenary waved documents before a knight only to be ignored. The mountain mage turned the gecko towards the sea and nudged it into motion. Perhaps the Order was right in their distrust of the debris of past battles. Kamahl knew his journey to reclaim the orb might have just barely begun. Why did he chase after it? Merely for the power it held? Perhaps, but more importantly, it was his by right. He would not let it be stolen away. Honor demanded he reclaim his lost prize.